Imagine a space so tight that you cannot move your arms. They are pinned beneath your chest. You cannot wiggle your hips. The rock is pressing against your back and your stomach simultaneously. Now, imagine you're upside down. The blood is rushing to your head. Your vision is starting to blur, and every time you exhale, your rib cage scrapes against the stone, allowing you to slide just a fraction of an inch deeper into the dark. But when you try to inhale, the rock won't let you. This is the nightmare of John Edward Jones. And on November 24th, 2009, this nightmare became a reality that would traumatize a community and close a famous landmark forever. This is the story of the cave that refused to let go. To understand the tragedy, you have to understand the trap. Nutty Putty Cave, located just west of Utah Lake, wasn't a secret. For decades, it was a local playground. Boy Scout troops, college students, and weekend adventurers flocked there because it was known as a beginner's cave. It was warm, always around 55 degrees, and its tunnels were smooth and slippery, made of a unique hydrothermal clay. It felt safe. It felt like a fun house. But Nutty Putty had a dark side. It was a maze of tight squeezes with names like the Helmet Eater, the Scout Eater, and the Birth Canal. It required you to contort your body, to trust the rock, and to push through gaps barely wider than a basketball. John Jones knew this. He wasn't an amateur. He was a 26-year-old medical student, a father to a 1-year-old daughter with another baby on the way. He had grown up exploring caves with his brother, Josh. But life had gotten busy. Medical school, marriage, fatherhood. He hadn't been underground in years. This trip, a few days before Thanksgiving, was supposed to be a fun reunion, a way to recapture the adventure of their youth. At 8 p.m. on that Tuesday night, John, Josh, and 9 friends entered the cave. The mood was light. They laughed, their voices echoing off the damp walls as they slithered through the first few chambers. About an hour in, the group decided to split up. John wanted a challenge. He wanted to find the Birth Canal. It was a famous tight squeeze, a rite of passage for cavers. You had to crawl belly first, negotiate a tight turn, and pop out into a larger room. John saw an opening at waist height. He was confident. He dove in head first. He shimmied forward, pulling himself along with his fingers, his hips twisting to fit the contours of the rock. It was tight, but he kept thinking the opening is just ahead. It has to open up soon. But it didn't open up. It got tighter. John assumed he was just in a particularly pinch point of the birth canal. He saw a fissure in the floor ahead of him, a crack that seemed to widen out. He decided to exhale, compressing his chest, and slide down into the fissure, trusting gravity to help him through the squeeze. It was a fatal mistake. John wasn't in the birth canal. He had taken a wrong turn into an unmapped section of the cave, known as Ed's Push. And the fissure he just slid into wasn't an exit. It was a dead end. The physics of what happened next are terrifying. The tunnel John was in went almost straight down, then hooked sharply. When he slid forward, his chest passed the pinch point, but his hips didn't. He was now stuck at a 70-degree angle upside down. His arms were pinned underneath him. He couldn't push himself back up because gravity was fighting him and the smooth walls offered no leverage. He tried to inhale to shout for help, but his chest was compressed against the rock. He could only take shallow, panic-inducing sips of air. His brother Josh was the first to realize something was wrong. He crawled into the tunnel behind John and saw only his brother's boots sticking out of the darkness. "John!" Josh called out. "I am stuck," John gasped. "I can't move." Josh, driven by adrenaline, reached down and grabbed John's calves. He pulled. He pulled with everything he had. For a second, John moved up a few inches. But the moment Josh let go to readjust his grip, gravity took over. John slid back down, this time wedging even deeper than before. The rock clamped around his ribcage. "Josh," John whispered, his voice strained. "Go get help." It was now roughly 9 o'clock p.m. Josh scrambled out of the cave as fast as he could, racing into the cold desert night to get cell service. The call went out, and soon, the flashing lights of the Utah County Sheriff's Office illuminated the darkness. Rescuers arrived, but they immediately faced a nightmare scenario. The spot where John was trapped, Ed's Push, was incredibly difficult to reach. It took an experienced caver an hour just to crawl to where John was. The tunnel leading to him was twisting and narrow. The rescuers couldn't bring in heavy machinery. They couldn't bring in large teams. Only one person could fit in the tunnel at a time. The first rescuer to reach John was a woman named Susie Modela. She arrived around midnight, 3 hours after John got stuck. She crawled to the edge of the drop-off. All she could see were John's feet. "Hi, John," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "My name is Susie. I'm here to get you out." John's voice was weak. Susie, thanks for coming." Then a pause. "I really want to get out." Over the next few hours, the team grew. They tried everything. They tied ropes around his feet and pulled, but the friction was too great. It caused John excruciating pain, and he didn't budge. They tried to chip away the rock around him with air chisels, but the space was so tight they couldn't get the angles. Plus, the dust choked the air, making it impossible for John, who was already struggling to breathe, to get oxygen. But the biggest enemy wasn't the rock. It was the human body. When you're upside down, your heart has to work double time to pump blood up against gravity into your legs. It fails. The blood pools in your brain, risking a stroke. Fluids begin to accumulate in your lungs, drowning you from the inside. John's heart was racing. He was drifting in and out of consciousness. He would occasionally hallucinate, talking to his wife, Emily, who wasn't there. The rescuers knew they were on a clock. They needed a miracle, and for a moment, they thought they had one. They engineered a complex pulley system. They drilled bolts into the cave roof, which was incredibly dangerous in the soft clay, and threaded a high-strength rope through a series of climbing cams. It was a 9-to-1 mechanical advantage system. This meant that for every pound of force the rescuers pulled with, 9 pounds of force would lift John. They tied the harness around John's legs. The team lined up in the tunnel behind, ready to heave. "Pull!" the command echoed through the cave. The rope went taut. John groaned in pain, but then he moved. He lifted. 1 inch. 2 inches. The rescuers cheered. They pulled again. He moved more. He was lifted high enough that he could finally make eye contact with Susie Modela. He smiled. The relief in the tunnel was electric. They gave him water. They told him he was almost out. He asked about his wife. Then the sound. A loud, sickening crack echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. A stone arch near the ceiling, where the main pulley was anchored, had shattered. The hydrothermal clay was too weak. It couldn't hold the weight. In a split second, the rope went slack. John, who had been lifted so agonizingly slowly, plummeted back down the hole. The impact was devastating. He felt deeper than he had been before. The incredible force wedged him even tighter. One of the rescuers was struck in the face by the snapping carabiner, nearly knocking him unconscious. Silence fell over the cave. The dust settled. "John," they called. There was no answer for a long time. Then, faint, struggling breaths. The mood shifted from hope to despair. The rescuers were exhausted. They had been working for nearly 20 hours. They rebuilt the anchor system. They tried to drill again, but John's condition was deteriorating rapidly. His voice became slurred. He started talking about seeing his son. The medical team on site knew the reality. His heart was failing. The pressure on his body was too great. Susie Modela stayed with him. She talked to him, kept him company in the dark. But shortly before midnight on November 25th, 27 hours after he became trapped, John fell silent. A paramedic crawled into the tunnel. He listened for a heartbeat. There was nothing. John Jones was gone. The tragedy didn't end with his death. Now the authorities faced a new, grim problem. How do they get him out? The position of his body, the instability of the tunnel, and the risk to the rescuers meant that removing John was almost impossible. It would require breaking his bones or risking a cave-in that could kill the recovery team. The family, heartbroken and exhausted, made a difficult choice. They decided to leave John where he was. The cave would become his tomb. A week later, crews arrived not with climbing gear, but with concrete and explosives. They filled the entrance of Ed's push with heavy explosives and collapsed the ceiling, sealing the tunnel forever. Then they poured concrete into the main opening of Nutty Putty Cave. Today, if you hike to that hill in Utah, you will find a flat concrete seal. Embedded in it is a plaque with John's name, his birth date, and the date of his death. It stands as a memorial not just to a young father who lost his life, but to the unforgiving nature of the earth beneath our feet. It reminds us that nature is not a playground. It is indifferent. A wrong turn, a slip of the foot, an exhale at the wrong moment. That is the razor-thin line between adventure and tragedy. John is still down there, suspended in the dark, in the place where the earth held him tight and never let go. And for those who remember the rescue, the sound of that pulley snapping still echoes in the silence of the desert night.